Hey Truth Seekers, it is Nathaniel and Carolyn here, and we are going to be showing you our deck profile for our Sadie, Hope, and Universal. Now, we did do a Universal Hope deck before, and we were kind of sort of mainlining Hope, but we were using a Universal Truth Seeker. This one, we are using a different strategy, and we are definitely mainlining Hope in this particular build. So to start off with, we have our Truth Seeker Sadie here. She says that once per turn, you may search your deck for a level 1 Animo excluding Ultras and place it into your small group. So she is a great card to get you those Animo that you need to see. Specifically in this one, like I said, we do run a lot of Hope in this one. And so we have more power cards of Hope than we do of Fasting. Specifically because fasting is only going to work for our universal costs. So I only run 2 of these. The idea is to basically put one of them into your small group. If you absolutely need it, you can then put your second one if you need it, but preferably you're only going to be having one of these in your small group at a time. Over here we have our 6 Hope power, specifically because Hope has a lot of draw power, and we do have draw power cards in our Animo and our utility cards, so we definitely want to have some of those in our deck to be able to see them on a regular basis. So we do have those. Drawing into it is not as necessary simply because we have Sadie as our Truth Seeker, and she gives us that Hope power to start with. So starting off with our Universal Animo, we have our lovely Princess Gem, and we have 2 of each of her levels. So our 2 level 1, level 2, and level 3s. Specifically, her level 3 is what we're going for. This is a good win condition of this deck, is that she is a 2 for 12. But if you have a fasting out there, she is a single power card, and that is just awesome value. So we definitely run that in here. Again, trying to use some different win strategies than our other similar styled decks. And because of our Universal, I wanted to run a Universal Ultra, and that would be our Mercifier over here. He is 4 Universal for 14, or if you have your fasting out there, he is simply 2 power cards, which he is just awesome. And then also we have our regular Mercifier as well. He's a 2 for 7, but he says that if this card is in your small group, you may choose to swap it with a level 1 from your deck with a victory point of 6 or less, and shuffle your deck afterwards. So he is a good utility card to go get those others that you need to see. A little bit less useful simply because you have Sadie, but he is still really nice to have out there in case you need him for something. Next, we run 2 of our lovely prayer group here. This is definitely a win condition of this deck. And this one says that you may activate this card using up to 6 of any power. When activated, this card is worth 3 virtue points for each power that is used to activate it. So you can use a lot of power cards, up to 6, and you could get a total of 18 points if that is what you choose to do. So he is pretty great in this deck. He's also a level 1, meaning Sadie can search for it. However, you cannot use Mercifier to search for prayer group. It's not really a written rule, but that is the way we play it in our house, simply because prayer group can be used to go get more points. We don't think that it's fair to be able to use Mercifier to go get your prayer group. Moving on to our Quillo. The level 1 is a Universal, and its level 2 is really what we're after. And that is a Hope, and it says to search your deck for 1 story card and 1 Hope power. Reveal them and put them into your hand. So it sets you up for your next turn. It is also a 2 for 8, which is a win condition by our standards. So this is a great card to get you set up and get you some good points. Moving on to our Hope cards fully, we have Infinifish here. This is a 1 for 3. However, it says when this card is to be discarded, you may choose to shuffle it back into your deck instead. And if you do, you gain +1 virtue point to your score. And this one is just an infinitely recyclable Infinifish. You can use Professor to go get it. You can get it with Sadie. You can go get it with your Mercifier, whatever you need to do here. And it is simply 1 cost, which is awesome. Moving on to our other 1 costs here, we have Schwimmer. This one allows us to go get a standard power card and place it directly into your power pool. So he is only a 1 for 3, but with that action on there, we really like Schwimmer. I do only run 2 of him in the deck instead of 3, simply because I need room for my other Animo. And then we have our lovely Aurora here. Aurora acts as a power card from your small group. That's what its ability is. A 1 for 4 is not bad value, but specifically this one is in here for its power. So let's say I can't draw into any power cards, and I've used all my Schwimmers, I've recycled my Hope power back. I can go use my Sadie and I can go get this card, and it acts as a power card from my small group, which helps me get there. Next, we have Daybeak. So again, we're trying to use some different strategies here. Daybeak is a pretty underutilized card. It is a 2 for 5, 1 specified, 1 universal. So it's not too bad, but Daybeak he's cute and I like having him in the deck. He's really helpful. Again, those underutilized cards, we're using Lamb Up. So Lamb Up is a 1 specified and 2 universal, which could be just 2 power cards with the way we have it set up, for 7 virtue points, and says, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Arrange them in any order you desire. So this is an action, so it's working from your scoring phase. So this one helps you get set up for your next turn, which is really nice. And then moving on, we have, because I have such a love for dinosaurs, we have our Conquersaur levels here. We have 2 level 1 and 2 level 2s. This is a 2 for 10, and Conquersaur is really great in this deck. We've kind of been pushing away from our Conquersaur levels in the past couple of deck builds and things like that, but I definitely wanted to bring that back as a win condition. And then we have Gazoom. Gazoom, again, a very underutilized card. It is 2 specified and 1 universal. However, it's the universal cost that is actually your return cost to shuffle it back into your deck. But it is a 3 for 12, so that is just beautiful value. And Gazoom is just a cool character to have, so we have 2 of them in this deck. We have our Hope Ultra for the deck, which is Percy. It is a 3 for 12. But says once per turn, as long as this card's in your small group, you get to draw a card, which is just really nice being able to draw, because there's not a lot of draw power within Hope itself in this particular deck build. And then our last Ultra of the deck, since we choose to run no megas, we need those cards and we need to see certain things at certain times. So we have Flow in here as a utility card, specifically for its discarding ability that says if you discard this card from your small group, you can just choose any 3 Animo from your deck that you want, which can include Cine Animo. And so this is a very utility-based card. There's no ability to actually play this card for points in this build, but definitely needing that ability, so we threw that in there. That is all for our Animo. And so moving on to our equipment cards, I have 2 gold in here, which changes the Hope return cost into just a straight Hope cost, which is really nice in this deck if I don't want to get rid of, or if I can't get rid of my power cards. Oops, keep moving my Truth Seeker over here. Next, again, I have equipment, and I have our lovely Paul's Chains, which is an absolute utility card. It says that the Animo to whom this card is attached may not be activated, but it can be discarded at any time during your setup phase. And it says that once per turn, as long as this card is attached to an Animo in your small group, you may search your deck for up to 2 level 1 Animo and place them directly into your small group. So this is just awesome. It gets around cards like Zapper King, and we really recommend running Paul's Chains in just about any deck. Since this deck does run Universal, we have the Universal equipment here, which doesn't have to be attached to Universals, but it helps. It is the Broken Jar. It says when attached to an Animo, this card increases the activation cost by 1 Universal power. But the Animo to whom this card is attached will gain 5 virtue points when activated. And then finally, I run a single Breastplate of Righteousness. This turns any hope cost into a universal and any other costs into a hope. So this one is just awesome. We love having this in the deck because it just really helps with the power cards that we run. Moving on to our story cards, we have a single Snake Bit. This is really great early game. I prefer not to use it past the first or second turn. But Snakebit in here says that playing this card forfeits your scoring phase, but you return your hand to your deck and you can select any 4 cards from your deck and place them into your hand and then shuffle your deck, and then your turn ends immediately. So Snakebit is great if you just draw something and it's just not a good hand. You can forfeit your scoring phase, but go set up the rest of your game really well with this card. I do run a Peter's Vision in this deck. So Peter's Vision says that search your deck for 1 level 1 Animo and exchange it with an Animo and any attached equipment from your small group, and you shuffle your deck afterwards. So you're exchanging cards with this one. And that's pretty great if you have something in your small group that you're like, man, this is great, but I really need something else right now. I can go exchange that. And this does not limit you from collecting ultras either. So you could go have some pulse chains on something, use your pulse chains, and then decide, I really need to go get my flow, this turn or something like that. You can do that with this card, so it is great. Then I run a Runaway. So this says select any Animo from your discard pile and return it to your hand, which is also super useful with Flow Ultra. We have a beautiful gate in here that says that you can choose one of the following. You can remove a hindrance card from your active Cine, or you can ignore any effects from your active Cine's ability for the turn, which both of them are great in this deck because your opponent is probably going to be running a Cine heavy strategy, which happened the other night. And so this card really helps with getting around that. I run a Rich Fool, which allows us to draw the bottom 3 cards of the deck, because again, there's not a lot of draw power within Hope. Since there are several growth stages, I run 2 Ascension, and this says that I get to skip a growth stage this turn. So if I have a level 2 Animo, I can place it directly into the small group without having to have a level 1, or if I have a level 3, I can grow it directly on top of a level 1. So this card is super awesome in this deck. And I like having more than 1 copy of that, so hopefully I'll see that more often when I need it. I run a Shake and Break, which says return 2 level 1 Animo, excluding your ultras, from your discard pile to your hand, which is extremely helpful when you have growth stages early on that you want to play, or things like your Schwimmers that you want to run, or your Auroras, or things like that. And then finally, for our story cards, we have Fishing Nets. You get to draw 2 cards, but if this is the last card in your hand, you get to draw 4 instead, which is awesome because, again, the draw power in this isn't the greatest. And then finally, moving to our Cines, we have our smallest and equally largest Cine in this deck is Flipper. So if your opponent is 40 points or more, they're going to be facing this big boy, but they have 39 or less, they're going to be facing this decent guy. So he's pretty great. He kind of feels bad when you run into him early game, but when you run into him late game, he feels great to hit your opponent with. Next, we have Judgeweed. Judgeweed is an 8, and he says as long as the Cine's active, your opponent may not reveal any Cines. So kind of frustrating, but it helps you a lot, so I like having Judgeweed in here. And man, this one is a showstopper. We have Zapper King. It says your opponent may not play any level 1 Animo from your hand to your small group on the next turn. And that can definitely win or lose a game. Next, we have Grump Roast. He is a 9, and he says as long as the Cine remains active, your opponent may have no more than 3 Animo in their small group at a time. If more than 3 Animo in your opponent's small group are when this card is revealed, you have to discard down to 3, which really stinks. Next, we have Bob Bubble. Bob Bubble says that as long as this card remains active, your opponent may not have more than 1 Animo of the same name in their small group at a time, which stinks. It's regardless of level, it's just the same name. We have another 10 here. We have Globster. As long as the cine remains active, your opponent must discard the top card of their deck as soon as their turn begins, which is really fun, but also really rude against an opponent that may have just played something like you're stacking your deck cards, like your lamb up. So this one really stinks if that's the case. And then finally, our last cine here, we have Grumble. He is our pseudo mega. He is a 13. He has no ability or action, but he's just a really big, very grumpy boy. So we like our Grumble in this deck. And yeah, so Truth Seekers, this is our Sadie, Hope, and Universal. We hope you enjoyed that.
And in the meantime, Truth Seekers, keep learning virtues and defeating cities.